I guess I'm okay. You are live. Did you see that? You are live. Did that come up on your side? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right, so we're live. I forgot that I be on LinkedIn, so I gotta share over there too. Sign in, sign in. I'm gonna do this actually. Let's see what happens. Who over here? Who was that in the chat? What y'all doing up in here? Somebody just came in. Where y'all at? I'm just gonna be me in the chat, and then I'm gonna let this do that. There y'all go. I be feeling fancy using this technology, boy.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all can't tell me nothing. Here we go. Okay, click on that. Can I share this live? Okay, boom. Sure. Let's share it to my story. That sounds like a great idea, Facebook. And let's see. Share to your news feed. There we go. That's what I be wanting to do. Come on, man. Y'all know I be running the front end and the back end at the same time, so don't be tripping. Be trying to figure it all out. Uh-oh, they said they having trouble on LinkedIn. Well, can't be concerned with all that. It sounds like a y'all thing. Okay. Post. Oh Lord, what's going on out there in your yard, Josh?
You never know.
You never know. Okay, what happened, LinkedIn? We're having trouble streaming to LinkedIn. Well, we finna get that correct right now. Let's see. LinkedIn. Yeah, we ain't got time. Having trouble connecting to my LinkedIn account in particular. That's rude. Let me see what's going on. LinkedIn. Come on in, folks. Feel free to say something. Say hello in the chat if you are here. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. Listen, StreamYard said they having trouble connecting to my account. I'm connected to my account. I'm gonna need y'all to get it together. Edit. What's this? Okay, this save the changes. Yeah, it's safe. Everything looking copacetic over here. Y'all tripping. I guess I can't deal with my account stuff while I'm like we are definitely live right now. So, oh well. Can I get LinkedIn to record? Is that a thing? Oh no, the devil is a liar. Exit. Okay. All right. Well, it's just gonna be what it is. If you planned on watching on LinkedIn, you shouldn't be so boring. I'm gonna need you to get on some different social. Feel sorry for the LinkedIn only crew for more than one reason. Okay. All right. Let me make sure we here. We in there. We in there. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Now I got my little joint pulled up. All right, y'all. Okay, I get it, y'all. I get it. All right. We are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to another edition of Take a Seat Race Talks Live. Where here at Take a Seat Race Talks, our mission is building allies who act in my interest in my absence. And I think for anyone who knows me, I'm very vocal about white people's need to find their place in this work and start getting to it. So we're gonna have to go ahead and work that thing out. White folks been getting away with, I was gonna say getting away with murder, but that's a bad pun in the current socio-political climate. Been getting away with a lot of not doing things in the last forever, to be honest, since the founding of the country. And so, we're gonna try to help the white folks get understanding. I know a lot of people feel a way about people of color, how we have to help shoulder the white initiative, but somebody's got to do it. And Lord forbid when you leave the white folks by themselves and let them come up with whatever they come up with. We see how that goes. So we're not gonna do that. I'm not gonna be a part of that. Okay. So here at Take a Seat Race Talks, we bring it on folks who are doing the work, and not in like the traditional sense of, oh, we're out here marching and being an activist, but like we need one thing that we as people of color know is we need people in the boardroom, in the back room, the people who are in the rooms where decisions are being made, white people, to be able to represent our interests when we're not around, because a lot of times we're not around. And so that is the goal and the role of Take a Seat Race Talks. Today, I have my good friend and colleague and former roommate, and I was in his wedding, Josh Hengen. Josh, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Let me make sure you can hear me okay. Everything's sounding good on your end?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Absolutely. So my name's Josh. Thank you for having me, Remington. I am honored to be here and honored to be included in a group of people who might be, I don't know, living out what it means to be an ally in any aspect. I teach 9th grade geography. I also am a grade level lead at a Diverse by Design public charter in South Nashville. I also previously have taught middle school math and led outdoor education trips. So I guess this is year 8 for me in education. I think most importantly, I'm your friend, and it's been a journey getting to know you and learning from you.
Oh yeah, y'all gonna get the inside details on the me and Remington and Josh saga today. I always kind of feel at odds of like talking about the importance of having a black friend. Like white folks, being in authentic relationship with a person of color, a person from a marginalized background, or just people who are different from you, it's a necessity. And like, we are constantly learning how to be in healthy relationships with folks. A lot of the narrative around the time of George Floyd's murder, which was a year ago today, or I mean, it's his birthday. I think his birthday is October 14th, so yesterday. Um, just talking about how there has to be kind of some guidelines and some boundaries to how to befriend marginalized people, because we're already doing a lot of work, building as we climb, trying to keep everything from crumbling around us, fighting depression at the same time. We're busy, we got a lot going on, and we want to be helpful, but we also want people to be respectful that, like, we can't save ourselves. We can't do everything ourselves. Like, this has to be a partnership. And so we're going to jump right into the conversation with Josh. I think, I guess this has become like my quintessential opening question. I feel like I've asked everybody this so far. So like a lot of times in the psychology and like human development field, we hear about people's socialization story, like the way that they grew up, the messages they received through their lived experiences and things like that. And those things shape them to be who they are today. So that is our socialization. In a similar vein, I like to switch that question up a little bit and ask, like, what was your racialization story? So like what messages, implicit or explicit, did you receive about people who aren't white growing up? And how did that impact your worldview?
Mm-hmm. I love this question. It reminds me of, Krista Tippett on the On Being podcast, which is pretty popular in a lot of circles, talks about like what faith tradition or like what was your religious upbringing. So like this is like my racial upbringing, which is so interesting to think about. and important to reflect on.
Yeah.
My mom and dad are from Pennsylvania and New Jersey, respectively. They're from what we would have called like middle class homes, particularly in the like 1950s and 60s. They were able to both get bachelor's degrees and both moved to Baltimore, where they were like participants in like the creative class. My mom was doing graduate school, but ended up stopping and was a dance teacher. And my dad got a degree in music education and was mostly like running bands and doing gigs. And they lived in downtown Baltimore.
Did they live in a Leave It to Beaver house?
I mean, maybe as a kid, but when they were in Baltimore, the neighborhood they were in was probably, amidst the like white flight, kind of like the challenges of lack of investment in city infrastructure. So Reservoir Hill had some challenging circumstances. And so my racialization story, I think all the way back there, I must have been in like first grade. So maybe I was 6 or 7, probably. My parents were just starting to become full-time teachers. They'd eventually be hired both full-time at a private school in the suburbs. And I remember my mom was out back. I think she might have been gardening or hanging out on the back porch, and someone had been outside. There was a family that lived next door to us, a Black family, and they had kids. 2 of them, I think, that were just a couple years older than me. And the younger boy, I kind of looked out the front door, and I knew his name, and I invited him in to play. I remember.
Okay.
And so
look at you.
he came in. Yeah, and we were hanging out, and I had a like one of the plastic Fisher-Price basketball hoops, so maybe we were playing basketball or something. And then he left. Maybe my mom came back in and asked him to head out. But what I remember is she was mad at me. She was really thrown off that I had like brought someone into the house without asking her. And I think the fact that it was a Black boy from one of the homes nearby like alarmed her.
How old were you?
I think first grade, like I said, like maybe 7.
Okay. Go on.
He was a couple years older. Maybe he was 4th grade, 5th grade. Maybe he was 11 or 12, 13.
Yeah.
And I just remember being surprised that she was so mad, because it seemed like such an innocent thing to me in my young mind. Like my friend was out, a kid I had seen around. I knew him kind of, like I had a friend inside. And then it was probably the next year or just a little bit later that we moved. And so we moved from Reservoir Hill and we moved out to the suburbs, to the campus, onto the campus where my parents were both working. And so then we were participating in that pattern of white flight, so that I could have something different as I grew up and attend the private school where they were working. So when I think about one of my earliest memories of race, that's what comes to mind, because I think it taught me something about where I belonged and like who I could hang out with or who it was safe to hang out with. And the message that I think I came away with as I was in elementary school was like, I should be out here in the suburbs at private school. I shouldn't hang out with the kids from the neighborhood where I had started.
Do you feel like, and I mean, there's so much, me and you both talk about our like therapy journeys. Like there's so much stuff from childhood that our minds just don't remember, probably on purpose. But like, do you feel like you heard those conversations, or do you feel like that's just something that your child mind rationalized? Like, okay, if we left, then we must have left for a reason. This is better. Like, was it explicit even around that time where you invited the boy in? Like, did your mom say anything in particular related to race when she talked to you about it?
She didn't say anything related to race in that moment. But one thing I did pick up on over time was the accumulated comments about where we were living.
Okay.
I wasn't supposed to go outside generally, but particularly at night. There were lots of comments about the corner store and about how the people who gathered at the corner store and what happened at the corner store wasn't safe. And there were comments about how the person across the street said he was a house painter, but was probably an undercover police officer watching the corner. There were people who would run across our roof if they were doing things, like at the corner store. So like there was this general sense of unease about where we lived and people around me being potentially dangerous, and I needed to be careful. So nothing explicit about race there, but I think as people do, right, like as children do, like when the people who are being referred to as dangerous are all Black, and we need to talk about leaving, I think that gets implicitly like forced
Yeah.
into us over time.
Woo, yeah. I guess I'm always surprised to hear like white people's racialization story because it's so I don't know if it's better or worse when it's like explicit versus implicit. Like, I wonder if there's any studies about like does it does racism show itself any differently whether you grew up explicitly racist or implicitly racist? But like it's every white person who has been on this show has some kind of similar racialization experience, but like it's just interesting to hear you reflect on it yourself because like how do you feel saying what you just said out loud about your own parents? Like does that impact you differently now that you are trying to live in a way that's kind of away from how they felt about Black people?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think something that happens, and maybe this shields me from some of the emotions around it, is it goes to an intellectual level. Like my parents would tell you, and I agree, and I believe them, like coming from the backgrounds that they came from and working in theater, which it was a relatively diverse world in Baltimore and DC, or my dad always felt more at home with the diverse like maintenance staff at the private school versus the like maybe majority white, maybe higher income teaching and administrative folks. But like there's this kind of cliche at this point that through the 80s and 90s, it became people saying like, we don't see race, like we don't see color, we're not racist. People over there are racist and we're not. So I guess I feel a little bit of sadness and a little bit of like weight or gravitas, like to look back and realize that they couldn't see the racist systems that they were tied up in, or the way their comments were like racist. But at the same time, I think I have some grace for them because it wasn't like awareness about race. I don't mean to, I get a little bit dicey waters here. I want to say it wasn't as much in the water as it is now for white folks. It was out there. I'm not trying to give them a free pass, but like it wasn't out there. And there's some weird other family history pieces that we don't need to go into too deep. But like I think my grandfather was one of the folks, one of the pastors involved in MLK's march in DC. Like there are some other like anti-racist moments in my family that I can point to and be proud of. So the racist stuff that was implicitly there is just, I guess, part of it, not the whole story.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think we touched on this a little bit in the conversation earlier about how like even and this is like this is things that I'm still grappling with like as a consultant, as someone who is trying to carve out a path of like how I think is best to do this work and where do we need to improve white people, Black people, marginalized people, like because it's not like Black people are perfect at anti-racism and white people are terrible at it. Like, we have suffered very similar messaging to y'all, like there are a lot of black people who don't like black people, including themselves. Like, and we're tackling that within our communities, the colorism and the anti-blackness that's internalized in us. But like, I think it's important to be able to have these conversations out loud without this fear of cancel culture. But like, it's funny, you were saying, oh, like, I want to say this, but I don't want to sound like I'm giving him a pass. I just don't. I just think there is so much more room for nuance than the current society and culture wants to allow for. And so, for people who don't know, I embrace nuance here on my show. So, and nobody getting canceled. And first of all, and canceling is not a thing. You can't, like, I can't cancel your Netflix subscription. Like, if you don't subscribe to me, you can't cancel me. It's not a thing. So, we're going to have our flat out conversation here. The thing that I'm thinking about that it ties to is that you're talking about, having these family members back then who were at the march or, I'm sure there were white people during the civil rights movement who was out there marching, just like there are white people marching today. But we also see that somehow white people always white up even the blackest situations, like we had to, pull white folks aside during the George Floyd marches and be like, hey, bro, this ain't some white folk shit. What are you doing? Like, we're not here to do all of that. Like, this is not one of those situations. Calm down, buddy. And so, yeah, it's necessary to acknowledge that there are two sides to the story. Like, nobody is all good or all bad. We're all trying to make it. So with that, gosh, I guess like with thinking about your racialization and how you grew up, going to private school, leaving which I'm assuming you lived in an urban area where there were clearly black people, and then you moved away to an area where there were clearly no black people. Is that correct? Okay.
Not zero, but we're talking like 10 to 15%, like many fewer, like not a concentration that stood up compared to like downtown Baltimore.
So, okay, so considering that, and this is one of my favorite questions, like, how did our relationship come to be? Like, I have a lot of white friends, and I love asking this question, like, and a lot of them will, I've got a friend who grew up with the next door neighbor, like his next door neighbor was the person who invented voicemail. And so like, it like invented leaving a message for somebody. Like, excuse me? And so like, how does one of my best friends, like, how does that person and me, who comes from West Tennessee, grown up in the country, poor, like, what about our relationship? Like, how did it come together? And what do you find unique about our relationship from other relationships that you have in your life? And do you think race plays a role in our friendship, or like what role does it play? It's up to you what direction you want to go with it.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I want to take a second just to like shout you out and your relational approach to anti-racism work and diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And anyone who is listening and seeking someone to advise their educational institution, you're the person they should turn to. I do firmly believe that. I went from private K-12 school to private college. And then from there, like many folks, I got plugged into like education and ed reform through Teach for America. I think with my parents being teachers, I always kind of had an eye on being an educator. I think in particular an interest in like history and geography and English made me interested in being like a humanities or a social studies teacher. And then I love being outdoors. So I was doing environmental history, environmental studies in college. I was teaching hands-on labs. I was going into second grade classrooms and doing lab activities with students. And so I was noticing that there were so many differences between the public elementary school, the private elementary school, and the charter elementary school just in the town where my college was. And then I started working for Teach for America to try to put some language to that and see like why that was the case, and what what role do teachers play, and do good teachers play in changing that. So that was my access point to education and ed reform. I taught abroad for a year in Malaysia. And while I was there, I said to myself, okay, like I'm having this amazing international experience. I've learned a lot about Malaysia's like a multicultural and religiously plural society. It contrasts really interestingly with the United States, which also claims to be multicultural, but maybe does so in a different way. And I had friends in Nashville and a connection to some schools in Nashville. And so I said, I want to be the best teacher I can be. I know that there's a school in Nashville where I can start that journey. Let me go ahead and head there. So I came back to the United States and to Nashville after rock climbing in Southeast Asia for a long time. And that was where I bumped into you. We were teaching side by side. I was doing 6th grade ELA, and you were doing special education. And I think you had an air of kindness and openness. And so when I said hi, you said hi back. When I had questions about the students we were working with or my teaching practice, you were there to answer. And I think that culminated with me having a really hard time in my first year, and I'm just wondering, like, why is this so hard? Like, this is not what I expected. Like, what am I doing? And I maybe somehow as an only child or something, I definitely internalized. I was like, what am I doing that's wrong here? Like, something's going off here. And I remember you being willing to sit with me in that. And even the moment, I think, was when I asked you to cut my long hair off. I said, I need to change my look. I need to change everything that's going on because it's not working and life feels hard right now. And so you were willing to work with me on some of that. And over the rest of that year,
love a haircut. It's supposed to, when I cut my hair, everything changes. No, the kids still gonna cuss you out if you don't come in their seats right. They just gonna call you a short tail now while they do it.
Yeah, and they did. I had a lot of growing to do in that first year, in those first 2 years. I mean, I still do, but that was where I think I underwent a really significant transformation. And you were just an amazing resource, really patient. I remember practicing with you, like not just how to give directions and how to do lesson launches, but also just like how to relate to students who were different than me. And that's not something I, take for granted. You definitely gave me some time and space to work all that out.
That I was about to like pivot into asking about the relationship piece, because in your response, like I heard, there were things that we were able to learn and talk about that were practical, like a lesson launch and like instruction, directions. But like, why? How was the relational? How did the relational piece show up, and why was it important? Because like in our network that we were working in at our school, there was no shortage of practical coaching. Like there were so many people who would come and say, this is how you deliver this lesson, this is how you should plan it. Why was our thing different?
Yeah, I agree with you that there was no shortage of help in terms of like teacher moves, and folks were sharing the best practices they knew. But at the school I'm at now, we've actually shifted and a lot. And so the like coaching that teachers get is not just like feedback and skills based. It's actually been given a whole new title and a whole new structure. It's relationship based coaching. And just like I think like the late Rita Pearson says, like kids don't learn from teachers they don't like, from people they don't like. I think that's true for adults too. Like if they don't trust where the information's coming from, if they don't feel seen and heard, if it doesn't like, I want to say work for them, but I don't mean if it isn't effective. I mean, like if it doesn't recognize their humanity, like then they're not able to actually make a realistic change. And I went through a lot of iterations of feedback. There was even a consulting group that came through and did the, NFL quarterback style headset, and were like giving me tips in my ear during my classroom instruction. And it wasn't the same as working one-on-one with you and having you give this mix of like best practices and real talk and meeting me where I was. And so I think in my journey to be a great teacher, and this probably translates, like certainly translates to being an effective ally, like having a coach and having someone who's able to meet you where you are and the patience to work through that with them, I think is so important. And I don't know, it makes me, I know you're interviewing me, but it makes me want to turn to you and be like what motivated you, or like what led you to give me your time? Because, it's a trope that white people are always asking people of color for things, for help, to take on more burden, to make change. Like what led you to go ahead and be generous with all that?
Yeah, I think I like this. I may actually implement this practice. I like you asking me something. This is a conversation. We taking a seat, talking. Hey, it's not technically an interview. Like, we doing our thing. That's a good question. And I think one thing I've learned recently in the last couple of weeks in my life is how relational of a person I am. Like, I've always been able to say that, like, as a fact, but if a fact in my head, but now I feel like I'm living it. I had therapy yesterday, and I described like the change that has happened to me in the last couple of weeks of my personal development, as I feel like I am allowing more of the rooms of my heart to be open. So, like, I think there was a time in my life where it's like, okay, I've got this one type of me, I've got this one presentation of me that I'm comfortable with, and that's the one that I'm going to like lead with. That's going to be my anchor. That's going to be like, all right, well, as long as I'm rocking like this, it's cool. And so, like, what I've recognized, even thinking back, I think as a professional, I was very fulfilled at that job because I was teaching well, even though I felt like there were people who were intruding on my ability to teach well. But the thing that was missing for me from that school was relationship. And I think I I remember seeing how many Teach for America folks and alternatively licensed people there were there, and how much they were struggling because all of their coaching and support was based on teacher moves. And it's just hard for me to watch people need something that no one will give it. And so um I think it was an opportunity for me to be able to provide something to someone, because the network, my school leaders, did not give me that opportunity. Like, it was like, okay, yes, Remington is really great at this and this and this, so we're going to have him do this, this, and this. And I think I lacked relational, because, like, being special ed, it wasn't like I had a fifth grade team or even a language arts team or a math team. I was in a different class, sometimes two classes per period. So I didn't really have like a home in the school. And I think just, the people who I was able to form a relationship with and be able to say, all right, I know I can talk to Josh every day about, because you have the same classes every day. So it's like, it was kind of the anchor that I needed relationally. It's like, I need a partner. Like, I need to feel like there's a home for me here. And I think you are part of that home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard you say you wanted to be part of a team and you wanted to collaborate. And
yeah,
I mean, it's become a cliche, but it's so true. The characteristics of white supremacy culture, one of them is individualism, like the idea that we can do things on our own is a fallacy, and it has to be collaborative to be really, truly transformational.
Yeah, and I think like just learning as a black person and like being able to name parts of blackness and being marginalized and being multicultural and just not being white. Like black people love a kiki and a kick it together. Like we get together and you kiki all over the place. Like, and I think about when the pandemic had first started. I had a client, a school that I was working with, and I was talking to their head of school, and of course, white people's world fell apart. Once they couldn't fly, they couldn't travel, they couldn't go to the mall. Now they got to sit at home with their husband and wife and kids that they may or may not like, and potentially have built a life around not seeing. It's like, oh my gosh, we've got to get that. We've got to get everybody back outside and da 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 da. This head of school asked me, like, I was doing a check in with him, and I was like, so how have you responded to COVID? And he was like, everybody's just, oh, there's so much of this, emails everywhere. We don't know what to do. Da, 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 da. And like once he kind of had his whole, like he needed to have a rant just for a minute. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And so he asked, he's like, and we had gotten to this point where, we talking openly about race and stuff. And um, he said, how is the black community handling this? And I said, we talk. I was the same way we handled the Trump presidency. We told y'all, like we told y'all, and you tell me we are on TikTok cutting up. We on Clubhouse. We're gonna raise multiple apps valuation to $1 billion because we on there dancing and kikiing and kicking it, and we are having a time of our life. Like even within in y'all's oppression of not wanting to give unemployment or protect people who have to go to work every day, we are still out here, black joy abound, just kikiing and kicking it with each other, And that is something that I think white people are starting to catch a hold of. And I think social media has been a big proprietor of that for white folks. As much as we hate to see a white person mess up the Savage Challenge or the Up Challenge, they get over there, ain't got no rhythm, they up is down and they left is right. I feel like for the first time, white people are pulled into something bigger than themselves. And that's why the white kids love doing everything that the black kids have been doing. A, we make it look cool and fun. And then B, like white people want to be a part. It's just that their culture has taught them no, and I think that is changing right now. And as much as I hate to see white folks in Air Force Ones and Jordans, there's some positives coming out of that. It's becoming relational. And I try to keep an eye on the positive side of that, but it's hard. It's hard to let white folks in and trust that they're not gonna white everything up and ruin it. But like I also, as a teacher, I try to view it as people behave because there's a need. And so like white people are latching on to us because there's something that y'all need from black people. And I'm trying to help give the words to that so white people can be a part and also honor the people who have already been here,
Yeah, that really resonates. My wife and I talk about this a fair bit. It's like all of the culture that was lost in the process of creating like a white race that was going to be different and in opposition to black folks and have all these systematic privileges. The culture that was lost, I think folks are always grasping for it. And what can it be? I don't know. How can we create something new and different that's not based in consumerism? I think is like the big challenge. Not based on consumerism and not based on genocide.
Right.
What do we do when we get together for Thanksgiving? Like, what do we do when I get together with my mom and dad? Like, what are we gonna do that actually is positive culture that's going to bring about like, I don't know, like positivity. I wrote down while you were talking too, like self-love. You're kind of speaking to the movement of white folks out like searching for something new or trying to belong. And I do think there are more folks than before using language about like, how can I be my whole self? How can I be healthy? Where are my boundaries? A lot of conversation right now in the culture, I think, about boundary setting. And I think that's all really promising stuff, because I think if that's kind of my theory of change, I'd be curious to hear yours. But my like anti-racist theory of change is like, if we love ourselves and we extend that love to like all other folks and like are willing to sacrifice to see everyone or more people have the resources they need, I think that's what's going to be long lasting.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of there's a portion of my interview that I have that's been like circulating the internet. And folks, if you haven't seen it, you can go to Take a Seat Race Talks on YouTube and look that up. There's a clip where I talk about why I believe white housewives were so enamored by Oprah, because like as a woman, there have been so many restrictions placed on women. Can't vote, can't work, can't have a say in this and that. Like so many can'ts put on women. And Oprah turning all those can'ts, not even just into cans, but like I'm gonna bust the whole narrative open and literally be able to do whatever I want. And for her to be able to do that as a woman, I think a lot of middle-aged white people who maybe can't explain with you with their own words why they're so attracted to Oprah, but I think it's because of her radical womanhood. And I think it has to be so deep. It has to speak so deeply to a need that exists in white women that they would look past her race. It's like I am so inspired by who she is, and maybe even wish I had the courage to do what she's doing, that like they're falling out and fainting and going to the Christmas show and showing up to watch her do these messy interviews with people. Like it's like, man, what is it that they want from her? What is it they admire about her? And I think that's what you're talking about, that identity. Like one thing that I have found, and white friends of mine are coming to a realization of, is that white people often lack identity. One of the things that when I see a white person wearing Air Force One, you are so far outside of whatever white culture is, was, or could be. Like, to me, you are lost, man. Where did you find Air Force One? Well, who started this? Who told you about this? You were so far outside your neighborhood that you found Air Force One? I wonder who you are. I wonder, like, what are your morals? What are your values? If you didn't see other people doing it, I would posit that there wasn't a white person wearing Air Force Ones before 2001. And so, like, for you to be searching so hard that you found that, there must be a huge hole where identity is supposed to be. And it's just interesting to me. Like, one of the things that I push white people on is, you got to get to the crux of who you are. Stop talking about who's voting for what. Stop talking about these various political issues that are just intellectual. Stop talking about, policing the bodies of Black people and women and children. You can't even tell me your child's favorite color because you're so consumed with everything else except reflecting on yourself. And I think what doesn't get shown from these powerful Black women and Black men throughout time is how much self-work we are forced to engage in. Like, I think about LeBron James, who for a lot of white people is just larger than life. It's like, oh, he just must be this lucky, fortunate, or super hardworking Black man. And if I had just done the work, I too could have been LeBron James. But really, like, as a Black person, you can't cross over into that kind of wealth without doing some very deep soul searching. And I don't think Black people, Black celebrities get the opportunity to show off the work that they did. Like Oprah is so Oprah that you don't look into how she became Oprah. Kanye, who we call it the mental meltdown or whatever they call it that he has on Twitter when he goes on his rant. Kanye is very openly working out his mental stuff, his marital stuff, his political beliefs. He's working it all out in front of us to the ends of trying to find identity. And, some of us are so ignorant that we shun him for doing that work, And I think it's crucial for white folks. I would say foundational. First step, you can't do nothing for me as a black person if you don't know what's going on up in you. Like, white people got to reflect. You got to challenge yourself, have hard conversations with each other. Like you said, what are we doing at Thanksgiving? Prior to Trump presidency, avoiding race and politics like the plague. And then post-Trump presidency, arguing with each other because you can't find a middle ground. And so, we don't went 0 and 100. How do we get to the middle?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I feel like we digging in there. We digging in there. My next question for you is it's funny. I thought it started this question out of we have a lot of great conversations which we've been doing here. And maybe this is an extension of the previous question, but what experiences and interactions between me and you do you feel have helped you better wear your responsibility as an ally? Because I think a lot of white people struggle with I don't want to say I'm one when I don't know exactly how to do it. I don't want to, do it wrong. I don't want to speak up and say the wrong thing. I personally feel like you do a good job of, I don't even want to say staying in your lane, but finding your lane first, and then you raced from beginning to end in that lane. When you figure out, okay, this is where Josh feels comfortable fighting the fight, you fight the fight in that lane really well. And so, where has that come from you? And does it have anything to do with our relationship? Are there any experiences that launched you in that direction?
Yeah, thank you for the compliment. I would be very proud if I can stay in my lane and do my lane really well. That would be plenty for me. I flash back to a moment, maybe it was a series of moments, and I suspect it was in that first or second year of teaching, and I know I was feeling very overwhelmed about educational inequity, the struggle, the challenges facing our students, but honestly, more so the challenges facing teachers and facing me and facing us as a teacher team. I remember going to the Vanderbilt bookstore and wandering around looking at all the books on the sociology books and the anthropology books and the education books and how can I find the answers? Where's the answer to this? I've never in my life not been able to find the answer in a book. How can I figure this out? That's probably a white person thing, turn into books.
That was very white. I've never not been able to find the answer in a book. Go on.
Yeah, and I think you looked at me, and at this point, your good friend Halim Genus is also an educator. Y'all had said to me individually and together, be if it was easy, it'd already be done. So y'all had already painted the picture of this challenge as something that's enormous and never over. It won't be over in our lifetime. And then somehow you said to me it was basically you're not your job, or you've already won, you're already successful just by being here. You're already saved to some degree. You've already are experiencing grace. And I kind of realized, I was oh, this isn't mine to fix all the way. And again, I think as a person who for their whole life, and this is connected to race and privilege, but as someone who'd always been able to find the answer and had been told that you were on track to do big things and you could do anything, to come up against something that was impossible, basically, and then to be told that that was okay, and that the only thing I had to do was do my best at a specific thing, and that was my role, and that was going to be enough change, that was going to be good enough. I think that was really impactful. And so, in the second year, what I could do is I could learn the most I could about curriculum. Or since then, it's been like, how can I learn the most about classroom culture, and students expressing themselves and their opinions in the classroom. Or other times it's been, how can I, now that I'm a grade level lead, it's like, how can I best support new teachers who also might be facing similar things to what I experienced. So I think giving myself permission and you really helped me give myself permission to see that there's only like one thing or a couple things at a time that can be prioritized, and then everything else you leave for another time, for other people, for the collaborative to pick up.
Is there anything in that about identity? Like, I feel like there is, but I don't have like all the things to string it together, so I'm just gonna throw it out as a question. Like, because it sounds to me like you switched from from some mode to some other mode. Like, at first, when you said you realized that it wasn't yours to fix, that implies that prior to that moment, you thought everything was yours to fix in that realm. Then, like you said, okay, I've never entertained this idea of like, what if that's not my job to fix it? And then not only did you entertain it, you like took it on, like you took it in and let it stay. And I feel like there's something about identity in there, or value, or something like that, like a shift.
Yeah. Can we play a quick game?
Yeah.
I'm going to go get my charger and be back in 2 minutes. I want you to hypothesize what I'm going to say about my culture and my identity.
Ooh.
We'll see if they
Oh,
back in
okay.
a
Go
minute.
ahead. Yeah. All right, Stream, we're going to play a little game. I think he is going to say that as a white person, his identity was very wrapped up in the ability to perform things or do things really well or fix stuff. Let's see what he says when he gets back. Dang, time's flying. We only got like 8 minutes left. I got to boot and scoot. I have to go to this last question and call it a day. What y'all doing out there, chat? Thank y'all for coming through. I appreciate it.
Do y'all need another minute, or should I dive right in there?
Go for it. Go for it.
I think another piece of white supremacy culture, I talked about individualism, but another one is perfectionism. And so I think being able to let go of that piece and being able to let my best be good enough. And I think also understanding that what I produced or the outcome wasn't always necessarily indicative of my worth. And so I think that ties back to that theme of self-love that I talked about. And also, I don't know, there's something about community there too, like being willing to share the burden with everyone and not feel like it's up to me to be perfect and create all of the change all at once.
And that was new to you. Gosh, it just goes back to the self part. Like, you are not the first white person who has said that to me about that job and that time in your life in particular. Like, I came to Teach for America or to work with the inner city kids because I wanted to make a difference. And like, and I just see me and Helene, we be like, man, well, it is amazing how you took this whole situation about poverty and injustice in schools and really centered it on yourself. I'm here to save the kids. It's like, well, dang, y'all must have a lot of practice in making things about white people instead of like what they're about. And so it's just interesting to see how that is baked in to white culture, because I don't think anyone is like wakes up every day and says out loud or looks in the mirror and says, I'm only valuable today if I do all my work or if I fix the problem. But somehow it lives in a lot of white folks. And that to me is culture. It's these learned, implicit or explicit things that just come with you. It's in your backpack, it's in your baggage. Nobody has to say it straight to you, but somehow all the white folks got the message. And so it's why it floors me when white people are like, color doesn't matter, race doesn't matter. It does. Like somehow, unless y'all all literally have a meeting every night and norm on everything, like the commonality here is race and culture,
So I guess like, what does one do in your opinion, or what do you do in your consulting practice when you see yourself in a room full of school leaders or teachers or district admin folks who expect to always have the answer, to be right most of the time, to believe that they have the best way to approach an issue? Like, how do we go about deprogramming some of these characteristics to create better schools that serve kids in a better way?
One of my things, like one of the tenets of how I do this work is I always tell the truth. Like, and I don't allow the burden to be with me. Like one of the things that I talk about in my interview is like the truth convicts. I don't have to. I can come in and tell you this school, and like actually, I mean, I include you in the building of this learning. Here's my classroom teacher piece comes from. It's like, okay, I'm at school A, whatever. What is your what's the demographic makeup of your school? Oh, we're 98% white and 2% other. Okay. How did it get this way? And then like it's like, oh, and like it's just something that they don't have to think about every day. And so it forces a person into this deep reflection. And I think there are times like that where you give someone a task and and you let them do that, and learning happens from the doing. But then there are also times when you you just have to speak straight to the thing. I was in a hiring meeting with a school before, and it was like our first time meeting as a hiring committee. And I sat for about 30 minutes in this hour-long meeting and didn't say anything. And I just kept hearing some certain words. And so 30 minutes in, I decide to speak for the first time. And what I chose to say was, I'm concerned as one of the few Black people in this room, because in the last 30 minutes, here are 5 sentences I've heard. I feel like we need to blank, blank, blank. This director of whatever needs to be able to blank, blank, blank. And to give them their own words and then say, that to me sounds like white people prescribing what people of color should do. And I said, no one in this room is qualified to do that except me. And so I need you to think about that. And then we need to talk about that. And then let's go back to what we're talking about. Because I need for a moment for you to, so I think in that one, that was a teach and a task. Here is what I'm hearing. Y'all, you said it, it's indisputable. We were all here, and these were literally your words. Reflect on that, and then let's learn something from it and continue on in that way. And so I think it's a lot about disrupting the status quo in a way that's relational. So it wasn't embarrassing. I didn't write nobody's name on the board. Lisa, you said, Sarah, you said, and Ben, you are just racist. Like, it's like I'm just gonna say this just happened. Let's stop and sit with it and let the truth do its thing. And when that happened in that meeting, people took accountability and showed up immediately different in that moment. And at the end, they were like, Remington, thank you for stopping us where we were, pointing out something that we could not see, and then like walking with us into where we needed to be. And so, like, there's a teaching element, there's a doing element where people learn by doing. And then there is the job of someone to hold space or moderate so that people feel safe to do what they're doing. If you think about the best classrooms, the best teachers are facilitators. I am holding space for you to do your own learning. And so that's a part of a big part of my approach with white folks, because I'm not trying to make them dependent on me. I need you to have an experience to be able to, because there's going to come a meeting, maybe one right after this, that you're not paying me to come to. I need this to be represented in that meeting too. So you got to learn. So that's my approach with it. I tell the truth and I do a little guidance and we go from there.
I think that's awesome. I think that's what makes I don't know, the impact of your work sustainable. I think lots of times people want quick fixes, or people want the numbers to look better, and it's just not possible to wave a magic wand in schools and have racism go away.
Right.
Baked in for generations, and so your approach to slowly reveal it over time, I think, is important.
Yeah, well, thank you. I want to wrap up with our last question because we are right at about an hour of being live. And just for folks who are popping in just now, the whole thing will be available at my YouTube channel, and it is down here at the bottom. You can see all of my socials. So, like, this will be uploaded. I think it's available immediately after the live on YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you want to watch from the beginning, feel free to do that. But we're about to close out. My last question that I want to ask you is like, what do you feel that white educators need to know about the relationship between their whiteness and the classroom? And I mean, we could even say the system of education, because I think we talked about that a little bit earlier when we were together earlier today. Like, white folks are showing up with this idea of a system that doesn't work how they think it does, or what they want to do is not going to accomplish what they want to accomplish. So what do you think, like, if you could speak to all the white educators out there who are like, I want to help the kids, what do they need to understand about their relationship between whiteness and school?
Well, I would first want to give credit to the white educators out there who are already doing the work to reflect on their own identity and how it shows up in the classroom. I think there's a growing number of teachers, and I think it's more every year, that are kind of doing the identity work that's necessary to, I don't know, let students be themselves in the classroom. I guess my advice, if you're asking for my advice, would be to go ahead and take a breath and recognize that this is the situation we're in is decades, centuries in the making, and it's going to be decades and centuries in the unmaking. And I think we should celebrate the small victories. And so when students do things for the first time, when students say thank you, when a student hits a goal that they have, someone gets into the college or post-secondary path of their choice, like, I think we need to celebrate all the small wins, alongside continuing, to your point, alongside telling the truth about where we stand. I think like there was just another report released. I think you put it on your LinkedIn page about how far behind and how like deeply in jeopardy so many of our students are across the country. And many of them are going to be okay. Like most of them are going to be okay. Like folks are so resilient. I think that would be another message I would love to get across, is to recognize the resiliency of children in particular. So I guess those are the pieces that I would leave us with. Like, do the identity work, celebrate the wins, recognize it's a work in progress, and continue to work in community with each other.
Is there anything you would speak directly to a white teacher's whiteness? Like, I think the things that you just named are good things to do. I think whiteness inhibits all of them. So, like, what would you say? What is a person who's like, oh, yeah, Josh, I agree with those three things. What are they going to come up against that they're not necessarily prepared for within themselves,
Right. The first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is fear, or like self-consciousness, like kind of the negative emotions that come with being on the journey of whether it's creating an equitable classroom or doing something different with your career and your money. I think the flip side of all of this is you need to be willing to make sacrifices, and each person is going to have a different tolerance for what that sacrifice might look like. It could be your time, it could be your money, it could be looking like your peers, it could be looking like your parents. So I guess the specific advice in that case I would have would be like, find someone who can speak truth to you. And preferably that's probably another white person, to not have to burden somebody to I don't know, continue to inject some reality into your thinking. I've been really lucky. I guess you often will speak that truth to me if there is anyone else around in a moment. But yeah, I think we need to create time and space and be in relationship with folks who'll talk about what justice actually looks like and what sacrifices it takes.
That's good. All right, I ain't got nothing else to say after that. All right, well, thank you for coming on, Josh. Thank you for everybody who joined in. Thank you if you're watching this later. I have one more of these at the end of October, and hopefully, I need to text my friend Ian. Ian, if you're watching, I'm going to text you soon. He is the president of the ACLU at West Virginia, University of West Virginia. He's in law school. Very smart and woke ass white man who is gonna come here and get everybody together. And he has a nose ring, which throws people off. Like, white people be judgmental, like, oh, you got piercings, you can't be smart. Ian's gonna drag y'all ass academically. So, all right, thank you, Josh. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Follow me on Facebook and IG and my YouTube, Take a Seat Race Talk. And that's all for me. You got anything, Josh?
Nope. Thank you, Remington, and thank you to all folks who are watching out there.
All right. Thank y'all. Have a good one.